What was the Industrial Revolution? It was a period in the 1800s when factory machines replaced hand tools and large-scale manufacturing replaced farming as the main form of work. Okay, so what caused the Industrial Revolution within the United States? The first thing was the War of 1812, which led to the era of good feelings. If you recall, in the War of 1812, Britain blockaded the United States coast, and we could not get goods in or out, so we had to start relying on factories within the United States to develop products, and the United States then would purchase their own U.S.-made products. Number two, it had occurred in Europe in the late 1700s, so we were about 100 years behind Europe, but a lot of people that had worked in factories in Europe then came over to America and showed Americans how to create the same type of factory system as they had had in Europe, and they were able to go from factory workers in England to factory owners in America. The factory system, which was created in Europe, was a method of production that brought workers and machines together in one building. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, we had in America what was called a cottage industry. Skilled workers, people who had the actual skill, would create the product within their home and then take that product and drive it to market. Now, the issue with that is that the product then would be very expensive because it could only be produced by someone who had that skill, and therefore they could price it at a much higher rate because not everyone had the skill needed to produce the product. Okay, the first industry we're going to talk about is the textile industry. The textile industry is the industry that has to do with cloth. The two most important inventions during this time period were the spinning jenny and the power loom. The spinning jenny and the power loom allowed unskilled workers to now spin cloth. Prior to this, it required great skill and time to create cloth that would be used to make products. Now that we have the spinning jenny and the power loom, we are able to create cloth at a much faster rate, and it did not require any sort of skill other than knowing how to work the machine. So one of the first textile industry or textile factories in the United States were the Lowell Mills. And they were started by Henry Cabot Lowell, who had come from England, and he started his factory in Waltham, Massachusetts on a river because at this time we are powered by water power. And he hired young girls to work in the factories. They became known as the Lowell Mill Girls. These young women would come from all over, and they would stay in boarding homes, which would be houses that provided food and shelter for the workers, and they would work for very long hours for a very minimal pay. But this was one of the first times that women were able to work outside of the homes. These young women then would send the majority of their pay back home to help their family, who usually lived on a farm. Okay, possibly the most important invention that was ever created during the Industrial Revolution were interchangeable parts, and they were created by a man named Eli Whitney. These were parts that are exactly alike, and this changed factories forever. Prior to interchangeable parts, if a machine broke down, it was a very costly expenditure for the factory. They had to shut the factory down. They had to hire a skilled worker to come in and refit the part because each part was unique. The skilled worker then would have to create a new part and then put it back in, and the factory could be shut down for days or weeks at a time. When Eli Whitney created the interchangeable part, basically machines now ran on similar parts. So if a part broke, they could go to a store closet, get another part that is alike, and replace it, and only have to shut down their factory for a very short amount of time. And they could also hire an unskilled worker to replace the part, because all it took was removing one part and putting another in. This totally changed the way our factories ran, and it actually greatly decreased the cost of making a product, thus decreasing the cost for the consumer. Okay, transportation advances. One of the first transportation advances we're going to talk about is the steamboat. And Robert Fulton's steamboat was called the Clermont. Prior to the steamboat, you could sell products downriver, but it was nearly impossible to push them up current, especially these larger rivers like the Mississippi with such a strong current. The steamboat allowed for water to go into an engine, which was filled with hot coal, and it would produce steam, and the boat would then run off this steam, and it could push against the current and go up the river. Amazing, because now people that were down on the bottom part of the river could push products up north. Okay, the second advancement are going to be canals. The Erie Canal was completed in 1825, and it was 360 miles long. And the canal system is going to open up parts of land that are landlocked, and it's going to connect bodies of water through this canal and allow goods to go to places that previously required them to be drawn across land. Okay, and the third would be the Transcontinental Railroad. It went across the nation. Prior to the Transcontinental Railroad, it cost about $1,000 for a person to travel cross country. After the creation of the Transcontinental Railroad, it cost that same person about $150 to travel across country. So, needless to say, these inventions are going to do amazing things for movement out west, and it's going to drop the price of goods because it is now cheaper to get goods to market. Communication advances. The Morse code, which was created by Samuel Morse, is a series of dashes and dots that can be used to translate or transpond messages across telegraph lines. Thus, the telegraph was formed. This is going to speed up communication. Prior to the telegraph, communication was very slow. It was done by horse couriers, and it took a very long time to get news across the ocean, but especially down to other states. And so news was often delayed. With the invention of Morse code and the telegraph, the information could be sent across telegraph lines, and there would be someone at the other end that could interpret the Morse code, write out the message, and have it delivered to the person in the nearby area. It made communication much faster. Farming. There were several farming advancements during the Industrial Revolution. The first is the steel-tip plow. This was created by a man named John Deere. You may be familiar with him and his green and yellow tractors that are named after him. The steel-tip plow is going to allow a farmer to plow land at a much more efficient and faster rate than with wood. It cuts through the land much easier, and it therefore requires less manpower and animal power. The next one is going to be the mechanical reaper. This was created by Cyrus McCormick. This is going to be a faster way to harvest your crop. And then the third is the cotton gin, who was again created by Eli Whitney. The same man who created interchangeable parts created the cotton gin, which had a very significant impact on the South. So what did the cotton gin do? Well, it made the cotton cleaning process more efficient. Prior to the cotton gin, a slave would be responsible for picking the cotton, and then once you've got the cotton, you had to pull out the seeds before it could be used to turn into cloth. And so it was very time-consuming, labor-intensive, and with the invention of the cotton gin, basically you put the cotton in, turn the crank, and out would come the clean cotton and the seeds would be separated. Now, the North was at this point excited that there was an invention that would make the cotton cleaning process easier, because their hope was that with that it wouldn't require the job of so many slaves. One slave now could do the job of 50. Well, that's not what happened. Okay, so how did the cotton gin change life in the South? Well, first it triggered a vast movement west. People started moving west because, two, the cotton became the primary cash crop. Cotton became king. It became a product that was very profit-oriented. You could get a lot of money for it in the world market. And people started moving west to start their own cotton fortune. It also pushed more Native Americans off the land because we now needed the land to grow cotton. And then the most significant thing that the cotton gin did was it actually increased the use of slave labor. Plantation owners saw how efficient the cotton gin was and saw dollar signs in their head. They realized, if I have all these slaves, but now the cotton gin can do the work for most of these slaves, I can now plant more cotton, harvest more cotton, send more cotton to the gin, and thus have more cotton to sell to European countries. So it actually increased the slave labor drastically, which was not the effect that the North thought the cotton gin would have on the South. It actually had the exact opposite effect. Okay, so what were the effects of the Industrial Revolution within the United States? Well, first, goods became more affordable. We've talked about it over and over. When a good is made by an unskilled worker, the price drops. When a good is made more quickly, the price drops. When a good can travel to market at a cheaper and faster rate, the price drops even more. So add all of these things in together, and you're going to have a product that at one time was very unaffordable for the average person become extremely affordable for them, because it was so much less labor intensive to create, and it costs the manufacturers much less money because they can pay a lower wage to an unskilled worker, and they don't have to shut their factories down to fix products because we've got the interchangeable part now. Okay, number two. It's going to increase urbanization, which was growth of cities. People started shifting from a rural agricultural life in the North to a more manufacturing life where the factories were, and that was where the cities were. The cities developed around these factories. Now the South is still going to stay predominantly agricultural because of the cotton, but cotton did not grow well in the North, so the North grabbed a hold of the manufacturing and became the leaders of manufacturing within our nation. Number three, it's going to increase westward expansion. We now have ways to get west, to get out west, other than a horse-drawn wagon. And we have ways to still when we move out west, we have ways to interact now with the North and the South. We have ways to get goods, and it becomes more efficient, the movement, as well as gathering goods from the North and the South, so it becomes cheaper to move out west. Okay. The fourth thing it did was it created two diverse economies. The North became a manufacturing economy. The South became the leaders in agriculture. The fifth thing it did was it increased slave labor. We talked about the cotton gin and the impact it had on slave labor. And number six, it provided jobs for unskilled workers. A whole new job market was opened up for men, women, and children who previously could not find work because they did not have a specific skill set. Now they could go to work in a factory and bring in money for the family income.